The Art of Yes. Interview with Jay Sukow.
Okay, I'm waiting.
Wait. Hey. Hey.
Hi.
Where were you? I was just in the other room.
I was following you.
Oh, well, I was following you. It was a case of follow the follower there.
Oh yeah, a little bit.
Can we take like 10 minutes just to relax?
Whew. Cheers to you.
Hey, to you. I've got coffee also, so cheers.
Cheers. Oh.
Hi.
Hi. Good to see you. Welcome in Warsaw.
I'll tell you what, the trip could not have been better. It was like, I closed my eyes and then boom, here I am in Warsaw.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's good to see you.
You too.
That was
Look at your shirt. Look at your shirt.
Thank you.
So great.
Matching to yours.
Yes, we did
that's...
this on purpose.
Yeah, connection.
Group mind.
Yeah. Jay, good to see you. Welcome in Warsaw. And I feel like in JTV, like I open the Facebook, there is 10 minutes with Jay. Then I close the Facebook, I open the Facebook, there's 10 minutes with Jay. Then there is a discussion about improv. And then there is like another 10 minutes. And then I open a Zoom and there is a Jay in front of me.
I'm like, wherever you look, there I am.
A good experience with JTV.
It's funny. I just did a scene with Elke Elke, and Elke's nickname is TV, so she goes by Elke TV Reed, and I was like, it's a TV kind of day.
Yeah, and I watched that, so I skipped from that scene where you played with her just to this.
Oh, perfect. Just jump right into it, right?
Yeah. So fun. Yeah, so Jay, you are a lot now on Zoom and online, right? So tell me, how is that? How are you? And how is that, the situation now?
I'm doing well. No immediate danger, which is my new mantra. I'm doing I'm doing a lot of virtual improv, and it started out because I was teaching for a theater that was during the pandemic basically said we're going to take a week to learn how to do virtual improv, and I thought to myself, I need to figure this out because it's going to be a tool I could use in my tool belt, but I think we're going to be doing things like this for a while, and so I started doing it, and I did it so I could start to get comfortable with it and be like, where do I look when I'm talking? Am I looking? I want to look at you, but I have to look there. So I started doing that and getting more comfortable with it, and then it blossomed into, hey, who are people that I don't play with a bunch, or I don't get a chance to play with, or people I like playing with? We all have similar schedules right now, especially. So maybe I could start doing some scenes with these people, and in the shower, the 10 minutes came up. It was like, do 10 minutes with people. So I do a series of 10 minutes with, and I ask people that I really enjoy playing with, or like Elke and I had never met today before doing the scene. So I like the challenge of that too, of like, okay, play with people you've never met. Like, what an opportunity now to be able to take advantage of this internet and the global audience you can reach. And so you and I were able to do a scene together, which we would not have been able to do unless we were in the same city for maybe a festival or one was visiting or something like that. But this gave us an opportunity to do it just based on schedules. And so I love it.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me, because doing this with especially new improvisers which you never met or played, what that taught you? What gift you take from that?
Oh, it's like walking on a tightrope
Mm-hmm.
with the thrill that I could fall off, but you never do. I have not had a bad experience with that yet, and I think the format of having like scenes between two people in this setting, I think works really well. At a point, because I've done a lot of scenes in my life, I'm less worried about every scene I do, and I'm less worried about like, is this going to go well or not. I just assume it's going to go well, and they have gone well, and they're just a joy. And right now, the I like talking to the people after the scene almost as much as improvising. I like to understand where, hey, how did you get into improv? What brings you joy? What are things, what's your philosophy on it? Like, after the scene's over, we don't like dissect the scene to talk about that. We really use that as a launching pad to talk about, like, how did you get into improv? Or, hey, in that scene you took this risk. Like, are you a risk taker in life? And it's allowed me to meet so many people and connect with people I haven't in a while. So I'm a big fan of it, and I think virtual improv is here to stay. I think it's not going away. I think it's always going to be a part of our community now.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, this brought me to that situation also, doing interviews, which is really great. And so I would like to go to your beginning, because you interview your 10 minutes guests. And now it's my turn, which will be a bit more than 10 minutes talk, which I'm excited. So tell me, Jay, because you originally you are from Chicago. You are not. You're living now in LA,
Yeah.
but you were born in Chicago, or
Yep.
yep. So you are how you call it? Chicago man.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we also say like Chicago over everything. Like, I'm born and raised Chicagoan.
Is
I
there a
was
special name for Chicago people? Like Andrew told me that he's called Los Angelino.
Yeah, so it's Chicagoan.
Chicago.
That's the Chicago term, is Chicagoan. Yeah, I was born on the south side, like in the south suburbs of Chicago, and was never gonna move because I loved the city. When I moved up into the city, I was 21, 20, no, 22, and I was living, and I was like, I love this city. I loved everything about it. Uh, when I was 21, I was finishing up at university, and my parents gave me classes for to take improv at a second city, and I was like, great. I didn't know anything about improv. I had never seen a second city show. It's been around since the '50s in Chicago, and it's an institution, but I had never seen it. I didn't know anything about improv, and I was taking a Saturday noon to 3 p.m. class. So I would come up either the night before I would drive up or the morning of. And I just loved it. I loved the team aspect of it. I love the doing stuff with other people. I loved creating comedy with someone else and with a group of people. And I loved, and today, to this day, I still love playing improv games. I love playing short form. I love doing zip, zap, zop. Like the warm ups, I love doing. I think they're so fun. So that was my start, and my class, a majority of us, a good core, stayed together. So we went from like our level one class to level two, and then level three we used improv to start writing sketch comedy, and so then level four and five we were like creating sketch comedy, and I just kept taking more classes, and then there became more opportunities to perform, and then somebody in our group is like, we have to take a class from this guy Del Close, who's teaching at a place called Improv Olympics at the time, and we're like, okay. So but if that group had told me, hey, we got to go take a glass blowing class, or we have to go take a woodworking class, I would have been like, sounds good, because it was the people, it was that group that I really dug. And so that was kind of the start, and then I just kept taking more classes. And I remember I asked a teacher once, can you make a living doing this? And my teacher was like, well, I am. And I was like, oh, okay. But again, I did not think, oh, you can do it, because there were so few jobs available that it wasn't like, oh, you serve an apprentice and then you become a professional improviser. I just looked at it, I was like, oh, the odds are it's not going to happen. So I'm going to enjoy doing this, but it's not like there's some sort of goal or end destination with improv. It was just, this is super fun. And classes turned into shows, turned into more classes, and then it became what it is now. But back when I started, it was not this global situation that it is now.
Hmm. Did you ask your parents why they did this, like why they bought this for you?
I I don't know if I ever asked them. I think they thought, like, especially my dad and I shared a love of comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and I had tried when I was I was probably 18. I did stand up comedy once.
Mm-hmm.
And so for some reason they decided, maybe it was they heard an interview with Second City on the radio, or they saw something that was Second City, or they researched, I don't know. But for some reason the thought of taking a class at Second City, they thought, oh, he might like this. And it just started as like one class, like an 8-week term. It's like, oh, I'll go for it. And then I'll never forget, it was like week one, I couldn't wait then for the next week. Like, it became the highlight. And it was my last, my last 3 months at university. And my highlight of the week was driving 3 hours to take an improv class. I couldn't wait to do that. I didn't want to party. I just wanted to take improv classes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember talking to my mom and dad about doing improv, not as a career, but like, I want to do shows. And they're like, well, if it makes you happy. Like, they were not like, you got to get a legitimate job, you've got to do a career. They weren't like that at all. They were more like, hey, if you want to go dig a ditch, do it to the best of your ability and do it if it makes you happy. So I was very lucky they were supportive in that way.
Yeah. Did they have like this awareness that they changed your life by that completely? No.
No, I don't think anybody did. I think even when because my mom, let's see, my dad passed away in 1998 and my mom in 2007. I think my mom at that point, she had seen that it was a career.
Mm-hmm.
My dad, it was still kind of early on and there weren't as many opportunities. So I was doing a lot of shows, but it was kind of like, it was almost like a hobby. It's like, oh, you instead of playing basketball or going bowling or playing football with a bunch of friends, he does this. And that was what it was for a long time, and kind of still is, right? It's kind of still this hobby that we do. But I think my mom started to see that it was more of a career than just a hobby, because it turned into that.
Mm-hmm. So when you started to do improv, how was it different comparing to what is now? Like, the length of classes, or maybe one group working longer time together. How do you find difference between then and now?
Well, I mean, the biggest difference is the amount of people who are doing it.
Mhm.
The biggest, like, I think my classes had 9 or 10 people. I don't think they were as big, maybe 14. There weren't as many people doing it. There definitely were not as many like theaters that had opportunities to perform. Like in Chicago, you had Second City, IO, Comedy Sports. I think Annoyance was there or fairly new on the scene. And then there was the Improv Institute, which may have been winding down. So there were really only like five improv type spaces. When I moved away from Chicago 5 years ago, I think there were like 12 maybe that or 13 improv theater like dedicated to improv theaters, which is huge. So the amount of people involved now as before is changed. Like people know improv. I go into a corporate setting and I'll facilitate workshops using improv skills for like communication or changing of mindsets. When you first started doing it, it's like who here has heard of improv? 20% maybe 10%. Now it's like everybody's heard of it, so there's a knowledge base of it, there's a reference point, everybody knows whose line is it anyway, so the knowledge of it, it's to a point now where it can be in these sketch comedy shows in the States like SNL where we've made it to the zeitgeist where now people understand it. So the knowledge and understanding of improv is completely different. There's so many improv books. There's, right now you can go anywhere at any point during the day and find some sort of improv jam somewhere in the world right now
Oh
at
yes.
some point,
Okay. Right. Yeah.
but like, so the sheer number of people doing it, the sheer experience of it is probably the biggest change. You would try to explain what a herald is to someone who has never heard of improv. Now imagine those are all of your friends, and so you're like, come see. You're trying to. So you'd be like, it's like this sketch show, but we make it up. Like it's like that show you watch on TV where it's comedy sketches, but these are completely made up. The people didn't understand it, and they would come to the show and be like, "Is there somebody coming out with a microphone and telling jokes? Is that what we're getting into?" Like they didn't quite understand what it is. So now at least people, if they don't know about it, they know somebody who's either taken a class or know about it. So the knowledge base is bigger.
So what was easy in that time and what was difficult? Where was the challenge for you in this first years, and what, because fun was there, that's obvious. I can see it in your eyes.
Yeah. Um, what was there that was good, I guess, is this was a dead end job. It allowed us to be like improvisers can be inherently lazy. So the fact we didn't have to memorize lines or wear like have to get a wardrobe or anything like that, and the fact that like most likely nobody's coming out to the show, there was an attraction to that. There was an attraction of like this isn't going anywhere. This is just kind of for us. So I thought that was really fun and easy. And I thought you when you first start off, sometimes you don't know anything, and that's a good place to be.
Mhm.
When you start, like when all of a sudden there become auditions to get into places, then it gets really hard. Like auditioning for like Second City, then you start getting nervous about that. So then there's an element of that, and there's an element of that's going to help validate me, or that's going to prove I'm worth something, or that's going to help me pay my rent. That's a job I can have. Then it gets to be harder. I think about 2 to 3 years into improvising, improvisers struggle because now they think I need to have a format, I need to be with this cool group, I need to be a part of this. Like they start reevaluating why they're doing it, and they start wanting to do things that are unique, and we got to be really interesting, and so they put a lot of this pressure on themselves, and they get away from Oh, I loved my first improv class because anything could happen and it was silly and fun. And then when it's not silly and fun, it becomes harder. It just becomes harder. And if you're trying to achieve some very complicated or unique format, you're going to set yourself up a lot of times for disappointment because you're trying to do this with other people and you don't always connect. And so then you don't reach the goal of the format and then you look at it like a failure.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a coach or somebody who goes, you didn't achieve the form. So then it becomes a lot more of a struggle as you go. So I think like knowing that there wasn't anywhere to go, knowing it was just hanging out with my friends. And those times were really some of the best times in my life, not just improv, but in my life. I found a group, like I was fortunate early on. I was a part of a group, I was part of an ensemble, and we all were going the same direction together. We all focused on the good of the show, not on our individual stuff. It's like, let's make the show the best it can be. So we all kind of put our egos aside or tried to. And that ensemble feeling was something that was I was really blessed with, and that's kind of what bleeds into my teaching and my performing now too. Is like the group, focus on the ensemble, make each other look good because it was such a part of my upbringing.
Mm-hmm. So do you think like people sometimes get too quickly to formats, to big formats, before they get certain level, which would be easier for them, to achieve certain level and then start more advanced. I don't know if more advanced, but more complicated. Like Harold makes people a lot being in a head because of the structure. This is what I've heard and what I experienced as well. So, how do you think this works?
Well, yeah, I mean, when you're doing like a structure like a Herald, it's math.
Yeah.
This plus this plus this is this. We're going to do it in this format. And then if you're in the moment and you forget the format, and then you're like, "Oh man, is this the group game?" And you're like, "I thought this was, right?" And now you're like in your head and now everybody else is coming out trying to tell you without telling you, "It's the group game, man." And you're like, "Cool, I don't know what's happening." So it can get you in your head because you've got something to achieve. I've got to achieve this format and we have to do this. And now, or like we're doing a tag run and it's like, oh shit, I know we're doing a tag run. I just don't know. It's a tag run of Star Wars character names. I don't know Star Wars characters. I can't help with the tag run because I don't know that reference. Um, when I took classes at IO, the whole reason to take classes there was they said they saw a need. The need was people who wanted to perform and get on stage. There were more people coming up that were like, we want to perform. IO said, we get you on stage the fastest. So level one, you're on stage. Imagine this, week 5, level 1, never ever ever heard of a Herald or seen a Herald or had any experience outside of improv games. Now you're week 5 doing a Herald on a stage in front of the guy that created it or in front of a group that has been doing it for a while. So it could get you in your head. I also know, like my friend David Escobedo taught a beginner class a Herald in 30 minutes and they did it well. So I think these are all skills. I think what would benefit a lot of people is the ability to feel safe failing in these improv classes. And I think if you allowed them that freedom to fail and to support, people would get to feeling more comfortable a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, shit. There are people. I'm sure if there are people who've never taken an improv class, and like David did, where it's like I've never taken. It's like an intro class. He looked at the class and said, "I think let's give this a try." And he gave it a try, and they did a Herald week 1. So who knows?
Yeah, that probably also depends on the teacher.
Yeah.
A lot. Uh, so
I took chemistry in high school for 2 weeks, and I dropped it. I couldn't understand a word the guy was saying. He was too smart. Then I took it in college, and I got an A. Now it was a 2-year difference. It wasn't that I was smarter. It was more like you're saying, like, oh, the teacher presented it in a way I could digest it and I understood it. So
yeah, but I agree. In case of improv or other experiences of learning something, that I know that a lot depends on the teachers. So
Yeah.
that's another thing. So talking about that, did you have any epiphany which was like, it's like, wow, that works like this in improv life, in improv experience, which made you like better improviser or gave you this uh, great input?
Oh, like, is there anything improv wise that's like like a philosophy that helps, or?
Or like a moment or event which was like
Oh,
enlightenment, you know?
yeah. There's a couple I can remember. I was taught like play to the height of your intelligence, which to me was a big attraction. Where it was like, oh, for a long time I had hidden my intelligence. I would be in situations where I did not want, excuse me, I did not want any attention. At times you would be, excuse me, be made fun of.
Hmm.
But then I found improv, and I found people who were like, yeah, play to the height of your intelligence. And I remember we were playing a game called Party Quirks,
Hmm.
which is you have somebody who leaves the room, and then you have the people in the room get from the audience suggestions of like personality traits or things like that. And it would be like a pet peeve. And then the person who left the room comes back in, and through clues where you don't say what it is, but you kind of give hints as to who you are, the person who has come back in the room hosts the party, and they have to guess it what the quirks are. So my friend Ed Brown got his quirk was picking his nose. So, of course, everyone thinks picking your nose is, putting your finger in your nose and doing all that stuff. He comes on the stage, he goes, "It's the new Cosmopolitan magazine. Ooh, look at that. Do I want that one or that one?" And he was doing pick as in select his nose. And I remember being blown away. I was like, oh, that was so smart. That was such a smart move to take and elevate the suggestion. So the audience's suggestion we can take, but then it's up to us what we want to do with it.
Hmm.
We don't have to do what's like, low hanging fruit or what's expected. We can challenge ourselves to come up with something smarter. So like that was one time where I went, oh, okay, I get it. Another time I was in a workshop with a teacher named Jean Villapeak, and I was improvising a scene with a good friend of mine, and I was being very sarcastic and kind of like smart alecky. And she stops the scene and she goes, "Hey, do you like each other off stage?" And I go, "Oh yeah, he's one of my best friends." She goes, "Then I'd like you to like each other on stage." And I went, okay. And that completely changed how I looked to improvise. And I remember like that same week, a friend of mine turned to me and he goes, "Why do you always why do you have to make fun of things so much?" And then she gave that note a couple days later, and I was like, "Oh, that's a sign from the universe. Stop being sarcastic, and instead look at this as support," which is the whole reason I got into improv. So I looked at those, and I looked at moments where we can hold each other accountable and not necessarily rely on the teacher or the coach to do it, but in the group we can hold each other accountable too. But I remember those or another thing is remember doing these group exercises where the whole group would be doing something together, and it was like the closest thing to like a drug trip I could imagine is doing kind of these group soundscape or these group journey exercises, and I loved it, and I was like, yeah. And another one I remember doing is I we were doing my group was called DeWitt, and we were doing a show with a group, and their name was Teenage Car Throbs, and we did this show called Double Helix, which is they would do like a 20-minute first part of a herald. We would do a 20-minute second part of a herald. Then the combined groups would do the third part of the herald. And it was super fun and interesting. But one night after our rehearsal, we all went to a restaurant, and we stayed in character for like an hour and we had this whole backstory about one of the guys in our group was getting married to one of the gals in the other group, and it was just this big group improv thing that was off of a stage. And so I remember those moments, and I was like, this is really cool.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So, speaking of your improv experience, do you find yourself like in kind of patterns you fall in still, or you like would if you would step out of yourself and look at you?
I'm gonna give me notes.
Not really, but you know, like we see other people and we notice things. It's not a bad thing or good thing. It's just that we have inclination and we're leaning to something. Do you have something like that?
Uh, I guess a pattern I've been in for a while is just not engaging in arguments. That's a big pattern. So like, if somebody tries to, like, they won't be able to. Like, I'll my buddy Bill Baylor will be on stage and somebody will try to start like a fake argument, and he'll just go, I'm not going to fight with you. Like, he says it on stage. He's like, yeah, I'm not going to fight with you, man. And then if they try to, he just leaves. Like, he just walks off, and he doesn't do it where it's like he doesn't do it where he's angry. He's just like, I just don't want to spend my time doing that. And so I think one of a pattern I'm in is I just choose to like my scene partners as we're doing these scenes, and so that's one. um I don't tend to do a lot of like really big caricature like dialects or voices or anything like that. So I my pattern, I guess, is I play different emotional states of me. So they're versions of all of these characters are kind of versions of me, but just different heightened like attitudes or emotional states. And so that's kind of a pattern I've done. You go through phases early on where you go, oh man, Monica, she really does great characters. And sometimes a part of you becomes jealous of that, and you're like, I want to be able to do those great characters. And sometimes you can do it, but sometimes you try and you're like, oh yeah, I realize like the way you play, I'm really appreciative of, but I just don't have that similar style of play. So it's not that you don't try or you don't take a chance to do it, but it's at a point where you go, it's kind of like playing game of scene, like a straight UCB style show. It's like I can do that, and I've done it. It just doesn't bring me as much pleasure and enjoyment because I work too hard, and my brain, I haven't been practicing enough that style, that quick jumping in, so I just don't have that same gear right now. I'm sure I could find enjoyment in it anyway, but I just try and get it into the scene and have as much fun and enjoyment as I can with this person. Almost playing like, what if this is the last time we got to play together? How would I play this scene out?
Mm-hmm. When have you been the last time on the workshop, like as a student?
Oh, when have I taken a workshop?
Yeah.
Oh, I took one a few weeks ago. I took a workshop. I take a workshop like once a week. I'm co-teaching a workshop with someone for a organization called Gilda's Club, and in those workshops, I find I'm a student as well in those too. So, uh, I also like to take workshops that aren't just improv focused too, to kind of learn. Um, and I've been to like I love going to jams because that also allows you to be a student and to learn from people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I know like last Monday I was in a workshop.
Mm-hmm.
I try to allow myself the time and space to take those workshops, even if it's once every while, because I feel like as teachers sometimes we get to a point where we feel like, not that we can't learn, but we get to a point where that becomes who we are, and I think we need to always remind ourselves, oh, we're not just that. We're always students.
Yeah. I've heard from few teachers that they were aware of not really going to other workshops because they already on the level of being a teacher. So it's like making students uncomfortable because teacher is with them. So it's like the one thing, because sometimes at the festival you have like a teacher's cast, then they have workshop together.
Yeah.
But it's not very common that teachers go to workshops.
I think then the teacher's job is to make the students feel comfortable, not like, well, I can't go to the workshop because I'll make people uncomfortable. It's like, no, then show up like a student and help them feel comfortable in that situation. I think that's the way to do it. And allow yourself to mess up. If you mess up, it breaks the tension. People think improvisers at a certain level know what they're doing. It's like none of us know what we're doing. I have no like nobody knows what they're doing. Sometimes people will have tricks they can fall back on, or like characters they play in scenes multiple times. I don't have a problem with that, but like the teachers don't. I think we just care less. We have less fear that the scene's going to turn out bad, and we trust the scene's going to be okay. That's the difference, really.
Yeah, visible.
Yeah. And it's like, here's the other thing. After our scene's done, oh boy, I got a whole bunch more scenes coming up.
Yeah.
This isn't my last scene I'm gonna do. If even no matter how that scene goes, there's another one coming up soon. So I'll be fine.
But it always has been like that, or like it changed at some point?
No,
No.
it's like anything you do. The more you do it, the
Yeah.
more comfortable you get at doing it. Right? It's with anything. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get doing it. I think for a while when I was first starting, I had that feeling of like, this is just going to be fun. And it was like, oh, we just play the games and the games are fun. The games are fun and it's going to work out fine. The games are designed. Short form improv games there's a safety net there. They're designed to be fun. Like that's how they're designed. Then I started getting into like, well, I got to challenge myself. It's like, cool. But what I noticed is those shows where I'm like, I'm going to challenge myself, less of my friends would come out to see it because they're like, we don't get it. What is happening? And so then it turned into, in my experience early on, it turned into more improvisers in the audience than audience.
Hmm.
And so I think improvisers, the forms are for improvisers, not the audience. The audience could care less if we're doing a second beat of a first scene. Like they just could give a shit less. They don't care about that. They're like, this is supposed to be entertaining. We're here because we need entertainment. So the more I can provide that entertainment and be interested, the better it's going to be. I go through phases where I'm like, I really love short form more than long form. Then I go through a phase where I'm like, man, I really dig long form more than short form. Then I go through a phase where I dig both of them. Like everything kind of changes, but the more you do it, the less you start worrying about each scene you do. So I think it's just practice building up that callus, doing scenes that don't feel good, doing scenes that seem clunky, and man, I got nothing in this scene. Like you got to do a whole bunch of those scenes.
Yeah. So when did you start to teach and why?
Huh. I think it had to be like a year or two after I took my first class. I mean, I was doing basically I was on a gig. I was doing a college show and we were doing a workshop before the show, and the person who was gonna do the workshop was like, can you run some of these can you do this workshop and run some of these exercises? And I'm like, what do you want? And he's like, yeah, just teach them some warm-ups. And so I did, and I was like, oh, I like that. But then I really didn't start, teaching for a while after that. But I would teach like workshops or every now and then, or like do a corporate kind of workshop. And then, I started teaching more and more, and I started, teaching like independent groups, and I started teaching like as a substitute for some theaters. And then I got involved in more theaters, and then I started teaching more, and then I love doing it because I love seeing people get it, and I love seeing people improve their lives, not just improve their improv, but improve their lives and be like, I'm a better listener. I play with my grandkids better. Like, to me, that's a bigger success than anybody that goes on and does improv, like, or uses improv to get on TV or movies or anything like that. The bigger success are the people that go, I feel like I'm a better person because of improv classes. And that's why I teach to this day is I want people to become better versions of themselves.
Mm-hmm. So, how about teaching and groups which have coach or don't have coach? What do you think about that?
Oh, it blows my mind when a group like I taught it and I was the artistic director and head of the training program at Improv Comedy Copenhagen, and none of the teams had coaches. And I am just always amazed because sometimes groups of human beings listen to the loudest voice, and it's not always the right voice. So you need, I feel like, and maybe it's because this is how I was trained, but having that outside eye to say, hey, here's something I noticed, I think is very effective. And if you don't have that, you can stagnate pretty well. You won't really grow. You're kind of doing the same thing. And now how can you coach yourselves when you're supposed to be in the scene and in the moment? How can you then after the show go, hey, let's give each other notes? I just don't think it's very surprising when it works like that. I feel like it's hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that groups would be like that, because my focus shouldn't be on giving you notes or you giving me notes. Our focus should be on what we're doing together. And then you have a coach who goes, hey, we tried to achieve this. Here's some things that were blind spots that you didn't realize maybe that was happening. So God bless groups that self-coach. I just find the success rate might be a little bit lower than groups that have a coach. But again, that's probably because that's how I was brought up. I'm sure if people have trained in improv and not had coaches, they would find it very silly that somebody else from the outside would tell them what to do. So,
Yeah, I think also in Europe, there's probably, I have the same, you see, maybe.
you got it from me.
Yes, I got it from you. I will get a sip of water.
Yes. Well, yeah, good call.
No, but when you said that, I was thinking that, like in Europe, improv in many countries is that new that it's also very difficult to find a coach which is on like higher level than the oldest groups, which makes it pretty difficult just to and everyone knows it, everyone, so like to coach each other, and it's pretty demanding and difficult to find coaches in these
Well,
communities.
yeah, and sometimes I'll be honest, sometimes the people who are a higher level than you aren't going to be the best coaches. Sometimes it's a lower, somebody who isn't as experienced. You know what's a great person to have as a coach? Do a show, then ask an audience member who you know who has no improv experience to give you notes. They will tell you the things because you're doing the show for them. So what better person to hear it from? And they'll say things like, I was confused at this part, and you'll be like, yeah, us too. Like they're very insightful. So it's at times I've encouraged teams like grab somebody's significant other and have them tell you what they thought of the show. And they're very insightful. So I think it's trial and error. And sometimes maybe, what has worked is groups have gone, hey, for these next 2 months, I'm going to step away and I'll be the coach. I'm not going to play with the group, but I'm going to step away and coach for 2 months. And then we rotate it that way. And I'll run rehearsals, but I'm not going to play as part of the group. It's just, it takes you really leaving your ego at the door to go, okay, can I take no? I'm going to take notes from this person. It does help too if you do a rotating situation, because then you also understand what it's like to be the coach, and you're like, am I buying in? Like I want people to buy in right now. Am I doing that when I'm not the coach?
Yeah. So
And with this, we've had the ability to I've coached teams online before. Like I know friends who have coached, we just haven't had the urgency till now. So hopefully now this opens up to when people go back on stage to say, hey, we could bring in virtual coaches. We could reach out to somebody who we respect, somebody who we want to hear from, and say, hey, take a look, we'll bring you on a camera into our rehearsal and run our rehearsal for us, or look at another services like send a tape to somebody, send a recording of your show and have them give you feedback on that recorded show. Like I've done that as well too, and I know all improv teachers would be up for doing that and coaches.
Yeah, sure.
And it's you're really not teaching, you're juggling egos. That's the big thing. It's about how do I satisfy all these different egos and get them to buy into this group thing when everybody's got their own stuff to deal with.
Would you watch yourself? Like, I know people that they don't like to watch themselves the show they played and it's recorded. Especially now it's easy because we on Zoom we can do that. And I remember myself seeing my first show recorded. I couldn't watch it. And then after 2 years, I did it and I was like, okay, this was wrong, but I learned that and so on. But what would you say to people? Should they record and watch themselves if they don't have a coach or like?
Yeah, I've changed my attitude on this. First, I was like, don't watch it. You won't be able to, like, it doesn't capture what we do. It's not good. And then I remember once I watched myself hosting an event, not even improv, just hosting an event. And my hands were like this the whole time. I'm like, why are your fingers not closed? I'd be like, hey, everyone. And it was so distracting that I was like, wait a minute. I can watch this and learn, not for the content of it, but for maybe the techniques, or like, oh, I thought I was being loud, but I'm not being, like, you can start watching for the technical parts of it. I say people should watch it. I coached a group, and they, after each show, before the next rehearsal, like during the first part of the rehearsal, they would watch the show. And when I came on to take over as their coach, I was like, you watch your shows? Okay. And we watched our shows, and it does a better job coaching a lot of times than I would, because it's like, you see it right there. And as a coach, you might say, be louder, be louder. You might give notes several times. It might not go through, they might not hear it, but then they see it happen on stage, and then it resonates. So I say yes, if you want to feel more comfortable, if you want to get better at what you're doing, if you want to do that, then get over yourself, leave your ego at the door, and sit and watch yourself. And maybe maybe it's like you don't want to watch yourself, but then watch what your scene partner was trying to do. Watch other scenes where you're like, oh, what would I do in this situation? I can't replay that scene, but oh, I noticed that we walked in too early. Cool. Next time, let's let it breathe a little bit more. So I tell people, absolutely, it's a tool at your disposal. Watch how you stand on a stage. That's an important part of this too. So I'm a fan of, like, yeah, if you want to get comfortable at this, if you want to feel like you want to improve, if you want to do better work, take a watch, because also your internal time as an early improviser is way off. So when you're like, oh man, I was freezing up there, I didn't know what to say, and it was going on for a while, and then you watch it, you're like, oh, that was like a second, but in my brain I thought it was like 30 seconds. So you start getting a real sense of, like, okay, what it's like on stage is different than what it appears. I thought I was way over the top with my emotions. I'm watching it on camera. Man, I was real subtle. So I have to make an adjustment there if I want that to come across.
So my next question is, what such a excited about improv man did for 4 years without improv?
Oh, what did I do?
Yeah, why did you break with improv and had a break, and what happened, and what happened during that time? What did you do for 4 years?
Oh, so like I said, I got in when I was real young. I was like 21. And at one point I was only doing improv shows. I was doing a show at a theater called ComedySportz. I was doing a show at Second City. I was doing a show at IO. And I was probably playing 5 or 6 shows a week. All my friends were improvisers. I worked with improvisers. Like, that's all I did. And I lost touch of friends of mine. The only times I would see other friends would to have them come to my shows. At the same time, my dad got sick and was dying. He got lung cancer. And so I was becoming also very entitled. I was engaged to another improviser we broke up. The group we were in, the head of that group, he and her used to date. At a rehearsal one day, he goes, well, and it was, I guess, a joke, but this is after she and I had broke up. He's like, well, we're dating again, mentioning her as a joke. And I was like, you know what? F this. And it was like the last kind of straw for me. And I said, I can't be here because I'm angry. I got personal stuff happening. My dad's not doing well. So I stepped away from improv. I felt I wasn't doing it any good. I wasn't being productive. I was angry. My humor was coming from that side, was coming from like an anger thing. And I was like, I got to work on myself. I got personal things I need to work on. I want to focus on my family. So I stepped away and I didn't perform improv at all for, it was probably 4 years where I stepped away and I didn't see it. I didn't watch it. I also got into, 2 really bad car accidents, like head-on collisions, similar collisions, like somebody turning in front. I'm going this way. Somebody turned in front of me 2 times, and it was bad. So I had some health issues, and I remember thinking like, maybe that part of my life is over. Like that, maybe that chapter, it's done. So for a while, I did a 2-person sketch group. We were called Men of Leisure, and we did like kind of sketches and alternative comedy, and I did that for a while, and then after that I just like focused on taking care of my dad and being like a caregiver to my dad, and like it was really tough because I would watch what happened to him, and he started like withering away, and it was this like, at the end it was a very rapid descent for him health wise, and so that had a big toll on me too. Like I was 28 at the time my dad passed away, and I was like, all right, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I did not even think about like improv or anything like that. I still had friends who did improv, but I never went to shows or anything. I was just like, I kind of hermited myself and moved, I moved back in to take care of my dad. And so I kind of left the life I had. And then I started working for a company called Club Med. I started working at these it's a all-inclusive sports type resort, and I was the village entertainer, so I was kind of improvising. I would dress up in character and I would go around and I would interact with the guests, and I was just doing bits, and I loved it, and it was so fun. And I met someone at that club, and we decided to move. She's from Montreal, so I moved up to Montreal. And they have a huge comedy festival, biggest one in the world, called Just for Laughs. And people are on the street corners like giving away tickets to see shows. They're like, hey, here's a stand-up show. And somebody goes, hey, you want to see competitive improv? And I go, no. I did it for years. That's the last thing I want to see. And he's like, hey, take these tickets. If you want to, go see the show. If not, don't worry about it. I'm just giving tickets away. I'm like, all right. So I took the ticket. I looked at it. There was a show starting in 10 minutes, and it was 3 blocks from where I was. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go watch this show. I'm going to play with them in my mind. And I'm going to see if my chops are still there. Because when I was at Club Med, I actually was teaching some of the people who work there. I was teaching them improv while I was there. So I was at the Village, and I'm like, hey, let's put on an improv show. So I kind of taught people who work there how to do improv. So I was still in my blood. I go watch the show, and it looks like this show, ComedySportz, I did, which is a short form competition. It's based on theater sports. There's like a referee that comes out, and there's teams, and they battle for points, and they introduce the first group from New York, and the first person they introduce is my friend Bill Cott, who I did a 2-man show with starting in 1994. So this guy comes out, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, Bill? And then they go, Rachel Hamilton, who was somebody who was in this group ComedySportz with me. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And I watched them do 3 hours of improv, short form games. And I went and talked to them, and they're like, what are you doing here? I go, I'm living here. I'm going to get married. What are you doing? They go, oh, we're doing this. And that whole week, I hung out with them, and we went to these cool parties, and it was like, they go, yeah, they're recording this show to be broadcast on Canadian television. And my friend Bill is like, you got to go back to Chicago. They're doing improv 7 nights a week. IO is 2 stories. I go, no, it's not. There's no way. What? He goes, yeah. You get so that was 2001, and there was a bug that was in my brain, and then after that, I was like, I think I'm gonna go back, and then I ended up going back, and I went back to Chicago. I moved back home. I remember telling. I had met somebody and we were engaged to get married, and I was at that point where either I was going to get a green card and stay or not, and I said I'm going to go back to Chicago for a few months and make money, like get a job and bring in an income, and she went, okay, all right. I think she knew because it was like improv was back in my life. And then I went back and I took classes when I got back because I hadn't been on a stage in a few years, and I started taking classes again, and then it quickly snowballed to where I got back on stage, and then I started teaching again, and then it's continued to where it is now. But yeah, I needed a break, and sometimes you need a break. Sometimes you're burned out. And I was definitely burned out because that was my sole focus, and it was like it can't be improv can't be your focus. You have to have other things in your life other than just going and doing shows. If nothing else, to bring to the stage. But and I stopped growing as a person. I was only improvising, and it's like it didn't serve me. I needed to take that break.
So that's a good place to ask you, what is when last time did you do something for the first time?
Ooh.
Not improvising with someone new, because we know you do that. That would be the good answer. but I don't take that.
Let's see. When was the last time I did something new or something for the first time? Oh, that's a good question. Let me think about that. Well, I mean, the pandemic is one thing that's new. Trying to survive in a pandemic.
Yeah, but like something for your choice, because pandemic is like something which came to us. But like choice, I heard you talking about like, hey, people, come back the way you never come back home, or take the book you never read. So, like.
Oh yeah.
I want to tease you now.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of I'm looking around here. What's the last time I did something? Oh, well, I mean, I tried to learn. I've tried to learn another language through Duolingo. I've been doing these science experiments with my son, who's 7. Like, the other day I did stacking liquids. So it's like you put at the bottom is like honey, and then you put like dish soap, and so I'm doing that, and I'm building these little. There are these like robotic things which I've never done, but my son's into it. So I'm doing a lot of like science type experiments that I never did as a kid, but because he loves it, that's something I'm doing now for the first time. He's like trying to figure out like putting a robotics thing together, or stacking liquids, or making slime, like any of that stuff I've never done before. So it's forcing me, his schooling is forcing me to learn things, which as a parent, you're like, oh shit, I got to learn how to do this. I got to learn this type of math. I got to learn. So a lot of that stuff is because of them, but I'm very thankful for it, because I'm like, oh yeah, that we made a bouncing ball with borax and vinegar or something the other day, and it's like, oh cool, I made this ball that bounced, which I had never done before. So that's one thing recently.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Challenging question, but fun.
That's
So,
a great question. That is a great question to be like, what is that? What's something new, something you've done for the first time, something new? Yeah, because, like you said, I mentioned it, and what I've learned during this whole pandemic is the things I tell people to do, I got to start doing them myself. I can't tell people to do it and not do it. So when I say like follow the fear, it's like I have to be willing to do that same thing. And so I've been doing a lot of that is just reevaluating the stuff I say, and then it's like, okay, make sure you do that same thing.
mm, yeah. So also improv brought you to acting, minimum as far as I know. So what's your acting experience? Like I know that minimum one movie you were playing in, but I don't know much more. So could you tell me about your acting experience?
Yeah, I was when I was in high school, I was cast in a play. I was cast as the lead in Huck Finn, which I, I was playing football or soccer at the time, and there was an announcement where they couldn't find they were trying to audition people for the lead of a play of Huck Finn. So they were having more auditions. I'm like, I'll give it a shot. And I auditioned and got it. And then I had to memorize this play, which was a lot of work. And so I did some of that in high school, but the memorizing script part was never appealing to me. It's just such work.
Hmm.
But then when I got into improv, I like the idea of can we make this seem like it's scripted? Can we make it appear like we've rehearsed this? And so I ended up making two films using improvised dialogue, mostly within like a scripted, you have a set storyline, but then you can improvise the dialogue within it. And so I really, really love doing that. And when maybe about 8 years ago or 9 years ago, I had taken some acting classes before, but I took a Meisner class
Hmm.
from she's now my friend Summer Austin, and she taught Meisner, and it was the closest thing to improv. There's a lot of similarities with Meisner and improv, so I really enjoyed that. And then I got around some people and had a group where it was like, let's use improv instead of working on another improv show. Let's see if we can create a film. And then you ask people to be a part of a film, and they're like, yeah, we're on board. So I did one where I was like kind of a co-writer of the storyline, and then the second one I was also the director of it. And so I really enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed watching people improvise and watching them make some great choices that you wouldn't normally make. So that's and I've been doing acting like my acting experience is not like a lot of TV and film. It's a lot of like live. A company will hire us to do to put on it could be anything like a scripted show about what it's like to work at that company. It could be like you're doing something for a trade show. There's all different types of acting in the acting world. It's not all like TV, film, and stage. So there's different types. I do a lot of like internal corporate videos where I'm playing like a doctor. And that to me is the hardest acting because you have to say medical phrasing convincingly, having little to no idea what you're saying.
Hmm.
So you have to go, oh, you mean the Med Infusion 6000 pump with a 4K dual action spring? And you're like, I don't know what the hell I just said. And you have to get it precise because if you mess up a word, you lose all credibility. So I have a ton of experience doing that kind of acting work.
Hmm. So is it possible to see the movies you did before, like the one which were recorded, the one you don't?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've got both. I mean, I'll send you both of those. Those are both online. Those are both.
Great.
They're both up on YouTube.
Oh, that's great. We can put
Yeah.
links on the on YouTube on this description of you. So let's keep it in mind.
Oh,
And
I
we
love it. And there's one it's called American Legacy. It's about like an appliance, the appliance king of Chicago, and it's their dysfunctional family. And a lot of the stuff that happened in that movie is based on real stories of my life or my writing partner's life. And the same with the second one, which is called Troubadour. It's a restaurant movie, and it's based on real stories. So these are all kind of based on truths, but a lot of the scenes are improvised, where it's like, hey, you've got to say this at some point in the scene, figure that way out, and they're able to improvise to get to that point. And I'm proud of both of them. I mean, it was a lot of work, and we shot it for relatively no money.
I've seen the teaser of one of them, and I saw you.
I know, it's so bad. It's so bad. And in both of the films, I think what's funniest, one of the funniest things ever is when dudes who are not young do play sports and take it real seriously, like way too seriously. And so in both movies there are sports matches happening where these guys are just taking it way too seriously, and I just find it the funniest thing. So yeah, I'll send you the links to both of those, and whoever, yeah, feel free to watch them.
Yeah, I will for sure, and I will post it under this interview on YouTube.
Yeah.
Description. Yeah, so everyone can then have a look. So tell me, what brought you to LA?
The weather.
The weather.
I mean, it was as simple as that. I was Mike. I had my son was 2. My daughter was newborn. Their mom and we were living in Chicago, and at the time would have had to have moved because we outgrew the place we were in. And so she said, "Why don't we move to LA?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'm feeling really comfortable. I can teach as much as I want." And she goes, "Well, you say to your students, follow the fear all the time. Why don't you follow the fear?" And that week, I heard an interview with Steve Carell, who was a teacher of mine, and he goes, "I left 2 dream jobs because I felt comfortable." So I said, "Okay, this seems to be a sign." And then it was -8 degrees and I remember it was a February, and I was like, "Forget this, we're moving." So we moved out to LA the end of that July, and it was for the weather because it had gotten so cold I couldn't do another winter in Chicago. I had done 45 years of winters in Chicago at that point. So we moved out to LA then. I live in a place called Santa Monica now, which is a little bit, it's still part of LA, but it's a little south. My kids live with their mom in what's known as the Valley. So it's a little bit north of where I am, but it's like a 10-minute, 15-minute, yeah, it's like a 15, 20-minute drive, which is perfect. So we're close enough. I see them a bunch, but yeah, we decided to make the move because we needed a bigger space, and the weather was a lot better here than in Chicago.
I thought that you were stalking your teachers because some of them moved to LA.
Well, I'm trying. I send out a tweet all the time to like Colbert. I'm like, "Hey, buddy!" Like he has no Colbert and Carell have no idea. Like they would not be able to pick me out of a lineup. But I tweet at them to try and get them. My dream is to get them to do one of these 10-minute scenes with me because I think it'd be like super fun to have them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've heard today the plan of doing scene with Donald Trump.
Oh my God. Somebody said that would be the ultimate test of my make the other person look good mantra.
Yeah.
Doing a scene with that guy.
Oh God.
Well, I know he wouldn't listen. I know he would argue. Like I already know going into it what it would be, but man, I don't know. I don't know. That would probably be the one scene you would see me argue in.
Hmm.
Would be with that motherfucker.
So, what's what did what's next?
What did he?
What did you moved to LA. So how is it for you to, I don't know, to fall in or to create a new improv community, and how that works?
Yeah. What I learned is like LA is very much a film and TV town, obviously, and it's not as much a theater town. Chicago's a real big theater town. Um, so I think coming here, the advantage I had was that I knew people. I knew a lot of people already here because they had moved, and knowing them in Chicago, the next step for a lot of people is moving to LA.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like I moved to a place where I didn't know a lot of people. I moved to a place where I had already had friends, and so I was able to reach out to some friends at different theaters and say, "Hey, I'm moving. If you're interested, if you need a teacher or anything like that," and I was welcomed with open arms from a lot of people. And then I started kind of doing my own thing too, because I didn't know when I first moved here. I was like, I don't know if I want to work for a theater or if I want to do my own thing. And so I came out here and I started at the same time teaching and finding students of my own and performing at places, and it's kind of grown. And I think improv now, or at least when I moved here, it reminded me of improv kind of middle to late 90s in Chicago. Like, it was on the upswing and there were more people doing it, and LA used to be a town that was all about stand up, doing a one person show, because they were people trying to get discovered. And so the best way to do that would be to do stand up or do a one person show or something like that. But then with the rise of improv and the rise of people like, Jordan Peele and Keegan Michael Key and Amy Poehler and Tina Fey and Colbert and all those improvisers, people started seeing the value of what improv brought. And then there became these groups that people could go see that were really good. And these theaters started popping up, and you had Groundlings, and you had UCB, and you had IO, and you had Second City, and you had Westside Comedy, and you had all, ComedySportz. And so it became more popular, but there was also still room to kind of create your own situation. So I found kind of the best of both worlds when I got here.
Mm-hmm. I recently talked to Neil Karan,
Yeah.
which I posted just like yesterday, and he said in his interview that improv is a community-based art form, which is a wonderful sentence itself. Um, so, what's difficult about the building this community? Because it's not always not that easy and colorful as we
Yeah.
want to have it.
Well, I think that is the term colorful is a perfect term, because like, you go to a show or you take a class at an improv theater, what are the chances that you get different perspectives? And I think that's something that's coming to be challenged and changed right now is, oh, when we're having this and we're building this community, are we making it inclusive for as many people as possible? And I think now people are doing that. I think before it wasn't that way. And before, it's also, you look at, your audience, and your audience reflected a lot of what they saw on stage. And so it became a more exclusionary than inclusionary. If inclusionary, I guess that's a word. I'm going to say inclusionary is a word. It became more of a focus now than ever. And I think it took this situation for a lot of theaters to kind of wake up and go, oh, this is a serious issue that we need to address. And for a lot of them, it's burning it down and starting it over and saying like, okay, we're committed to this change. But I think we have to be that way. We have to be committed to doing the work to put into this, to build it up to be better than it was before, and to welcome more voices to the stage and welcome more voices to our training center and more voices as our teachers. And because we don't have brick and mortar theaters anymore, I mean, they're still there, but very few. Now the internet has allowed us to be able to reach out and connect with any person who's interested in doing improv from any part of the world. And I think that's going to make us stronger. And Neil talks about community, and a similar idea is from my friend David Escobedo, who talks about ecosystem.
Yeah.
So instead of being like, I'm an IO guy, I'm an Improv Comedy Bangalore gal, I'm a Second City person, instead of that, it's like, no, we're improvisers. So my big thing with this is like, very simple. Stop bashing short form, long form. Stop bashing all of that stuff. It's all good. Some stuff you might not like. That's okay. You don't have to like everything. But stop bashing those things. Start looking for ways to bring people together, and start looking for those opportunities where we can build it up and say, let's have as many voices heard as possible, because that's going to make for a richer ecosystem than just narrowing it to a select few.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, it comes to my mind about European improv, and you know about it a little bit because you started to come over to Europe and already for a few years, and you've been teaching in Copenhagen for like half a year or something like that, and we've met on the festival. So, how do you find European improv at that moment comparing to American, but in case of like development, like how do you feel how Europe is growing or not growing? What you can learn as a improviser from America, from seeing improv scene in Europe now?
I think it's honestly, I think it's really exciting, and I think I equate European improvisers, how they feel about American improvisers, to the way Chicago feels about New York, meaning it's this inferiority, unnecessary inferiority complex.
Mm-hmm.
And even something like Chicago's the home of improv, second city, that term, we're the second city. We're not the first city. So it's this complex, and people hold up Chicago as like, once I've gone there, now I'm an improviser. I've got to get to Chicago. And it's like, you don't. I've seen the best improv I've seen has been outside of America. I'll never forget the Mayday show. It was Happily Never After that I saw in Barcelona. I'll never forget the Neil Curran show I saw in Barcelona, right? And I was just like, I'll never forget that show that was in Catalan in Barcelona, which was unfucking believable. I just saw Improv Comedy Bangalore. They had a marathon, and they did a playback theater show from a group called City Lamps that blew my mind.
Also,
So
Graf in Barcelona was there.
yeah, yeah. So like, I feel like because sometimes when you're that feeling of underdog, you like try harder, so you are more creative and you go. It's almost like a chip on your shoulder. Like I'm going to show them sometimes, which could be really good because then you create more. You get your improv sometimes from a book, and then you go, all right, we read the book, let's try something. So you're not as bound by we have to do it that way,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more like you have more freedom, and it's more exciting. In Chicago, you can see an improv show all the time, but it doesn't mean they're great shows. It doesn't. And when people go to Chicago from other countries and they watch a bunch of shows, or they go to LA and they watch a bunch of shows at these famed theaters that in their mind you're thinking every show they do is brilliant. Every show's fucking amazing. And then you go and see it and you're like, oh, I mean, some are brilliant. A lot of them aren't. A lot of them, it's like, oh, I could do that, or I do better work than that. So I think it's all part of this, this ecosystem where people start also, it's very exciting when because part of this is you're taking your own point of view and your experiences and you're bringing it into and onto the stage. And those are different points of view and experiences than I have. And I feel like North American improvisers, US, Canada, some British, like some UK and some Australian, rely a lot of very heavily on words because that's part of our upbringing. Like puns and wordplay are very important to us. Whereas I think a lot of European improvisers, they are using emotion more, or improvisers in India are using status a lot more than the US is. And so I think it's nothing but excitement, and I really enjoy it. I enjoy watching shows in other languages too, to be like, can I understand? And most of the time you completely understand what's happening whether you speak the language or not. So I feel like it's just becoming this explosion. Like I went to Latvia last year, and I'm watching these improvisers, and I'm watching them, and I'm like, holy shit, like they're really good. And the biggest thing I hear from improvisers in other countries is they always preface it by how long they've been doing it,
Mm-hmm.
and an apology. Hey, I'm sorry, I've only been doing it 2 years. Like that's the big thing that I hear a lot from like European improvisers is they cite the amount of time they're doing it almost with an apology. So I think moving forward, it's like everyone's on the same playing field. The excitement. When I watch shows, I'm seeing people make so many good creative choices that I think it's becoming there should be and there is less of a gap between American improv and European improv. It's like no, I think it's like this, and I think sometimes it's like those shows are a lot more creative because you're not relying as much on the verbal part of it that a lot of times Americans do, which goes back to the whole thing about the format. Sometimes the format stuff is real heavy on verbal things and like tag outs and things like that. So it's relying on that or the game or like these references that sometimes people don't get. So I hope that European and improvisers in Asia and throughout the world are starting to see, hey, let's embrace our culture. Let's embrace our point of view. Let's embrace our heritage. Let's bring that to the stage. And maybe you come from a culture where storytelling is a big part of it. So then you can bring that to the stage and have that be part of your format, or myths and legends, and you're like, cool, let's explore shows that deal with myths and legends rather than, oh, I gotta learn the IO style, or I gotta once I know the UCB style, once I know Game of Scene, I'm gonna be a great improviser. It's like no, it's a tool, but it's not. My one wish is for people not to hold American improv up on a high pedestal anymore, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. It makes
Yeah.
So, what did you learn, or what was new, or what gifts you got from European improv and you brought to your teaching or to your space? Is there something like that?
Oh yeah. One is slow the fuck down, Jay. Slow down with the words. Another is talk less. Get people doing more. I think European improvisers do object work a lot more than Americans do. I also got it's a reinforcement that the relationship to me is what's key. It's what's important. The relationship, the emotional connection. I think Europeans maybe are able, well, it depends. Some Europeans are able to access and show those emotions more. But I definitely think there's a bigger physicality. And this is just a generalized observation I have. But I think the physicality can be a lot more. And so taking that physicality back, taking a reliance less upon words and more upon the connections, I think is something I incorporate now more than I did before. And being aware and saying, wait a minute, there's nothing wrong with me editing myself of what I'm going to say based on my audience. Like, and I mean it in this way. I used to say, hey, don't throw your partner under the bus in this scene. That's a phrase that a lot of people don't understand what that means. So I have to be aware of that and go, oh, wow, even some of these phrases that I've said a bunch, people might not understand those. So I have to be aware of that. So when I'm talking, it's like, oh, cool, make sure that I'm saying something that everyone can take in. If I'm dealing with people who English isn't their first language and they speak English, but they are really self-conscious about it, then I need to also slow down and take a breath and not speak as fast because I get very excited about improv, which means I speak very quickly at times. So I have to slow down, which has forced me to economize my words, which I think has made me a more effective teacher.
Yeah. So, what's I have to. Tools and rules. How can we discuss that? Because this is I love that subject because I'm very much in tools, and and there are rules which we know. So how would you explain that?
Well, I would say everything is a tool, not a rule. And you go into a scene and you have this belt with tools on it, and you go, in this situation, I'm going to pull this tool out and use it, and that tool might be yes and, or like your partner might be another tool, but you use that. If you set these things as rules, what is a human the human feeling of breaking a rule is shame, embarrassment, I fucked up, I didn't do what the teacher wanted, I didn't achieve the goal. But if you instead change that label to these are not rules, therefore you can't really break them, but these are tools. So you get in a situation, and then the next time you're in a similar situation, you can go, oh, that tool worked for me, or boy, that I'm going to use a different tool in this situation. These are all tools you can use, but anybody who phrases it as rules, there are almost an unlimited number of scenes that have broken those rules that work very well. Like, for me, I don't like arguing in scenes. It's not going to be a rule. For me, a tool is, let's agree. That's a tool I'm going to use. But there are lots of improv scenes where there are arguments. And, if your goal is to make people laugh, people have laughed from that. If your goal is to sustain an emotional choice, I'm sure that's happened as well. But for me, I don't want to use that. I want to use this tool of agreement. So looking at things as far as like tools, not rules, because there's no more, I guess nothing more interesting than when you tell a class not to do something, they come and see a show where somebody does it and it works. And then the next class they go, you told us this was a rule, but then so-and-so broke the rule. And then you get this note, which I have a hard time with, which is when somebody goes, learn the rules so then you can break the rules. Like, I get a hard time with that because as a student, I'd be like, well, why can't I break the rule now? Why do it makes it to me harder. Mm-hmm. It makes it harder. So instead, it's like, when you get up there, it's up to you what you want to do. If you're in a group and they love to argue, great, then that's the right group for you. So I can't be like, don't argue, that's a rule. It's like, no, these are all, again, just tools. And eventually, when you get to a point where you start finding the people who like to use the same tools you do, and then that's when good groups happen. Mm-hmm. Like my first group way back when I started, we were called Waka Malaka, and one of the things we agreed on is we didn't swear. We thought we could play smarter. So we were in a group, and that was the thing we just didn't do. And so for some people, they're like, no, I want to be able to swear. It's like, okay, but one of the tools we had was like, let's see if we can use our intelligence to not swear in these scenes and so that was a tool. But I think making them rules, it's very hard. It's very hard to set something as a rule where it's like, here's an example too. Here's a rule. Don't ask questions. Well, why not? Why the fuck not? Will you marry me is a question. Why I can't ask that? Yeah. But I think what they're trying to say, is provide information. Yeah. I think that's the note flipped. So it's like, instead of saying don't do something, because when I say don't ask questions, let's say a question is asked, now that person's in their head, they fucked up, they broke the rule. Now they're out of the scene, and they might be out of the class. They might never come back to improv because they broke the rule. But if you go provide information, now you're giving the brain something to achieve rather than something not to achieve.
Mm-hmm. And coming to good teachers, this is for me the very nice example of good teacher and not very good teacher, because teachers should show you how you can progress. Yeah. And by telling giving the tool is giving a opportunity to check something new and learn, and not giving it's just not giving any progress, right? So
yeah. And then and with that too, it's like, now that you've got the students trying to do what you want as a teacher, they're trying to achieve the thing you want. Joe Bill, I remember there's this guy. I was in a group with this kid. His name was Jeremy Sisenko, and he's very funny, a very dry sense of humor. And Joe Bill was teaching a class, and Joe Bill goes, you can't just stand there and put your hand on somebody's shoulder and think that's funny. He goes two people up, and Jeremy Sisenko stood there in the next scene, hand on shoulder, did a hilarious scene. And it was the best thing ever. And Joe's like, all right. So you can't make these rules because there are so many things that break those rules. So instead of phrasing it as rules, just say, here are some tools. And when you're in that scene, pick the tool you think will make it easiest for you.
Yeah, I found out one thing about rules, that rule is something which works always. So it can't be rule which works always because there in other situation doesn't work. So it's
Yes.
not a rule, right?
Right? It's exactly. It's like that thing you say doesn't work always. Like you show me a rule and I can in my mind I can probably cite several scenes I've seen that have broken that rule.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. That's fun. That's fun.
And also, Monica, I mean, don't we all want to get into a place of play but then have rules? Let's use our imagination, but let's make sure we have these rules. It's like, nobody likes that. But if you have tools to explore, I think that helps more.
Yeah. Um, so what's the Follow the Fear Friday?
Oh, I stole that from someone as far as like do something that scares you. Follow that fear. Do one thing that scares you. And I'm not talking like run into traffic, but like safety first and that thing could be, I got to send that email. That thing could be, oh, I need to call this person. That thing could be, I'm signing up for that guitar class I wanna take. I've had people who have, and I'm not saying to do this, but they've called off weddings. They've quit jobs, and they said it was the push they needed. And I haven't had anybody yet say to me, hey, that thing you did, you asked me to follow the fear and I did it. Boy, my life is worse. They've all said it's something that pushed me out of my comfort zone, which also allows you to grow. And a lot of times in our brains, we build up a fear to be bigger than what it is. And if you just do it, if you just send that email that you're afraid of sending, it almost always is not as bad as you think it is. So getting in the habit of like following the fear, doing something, like I this seems silly, but I started biking around my neighborhood, which in LA can be a very dangerous thing. But where I am now, it's like, no, it's allowed me to have exercise. I found the roads that I can take that are safe. I actually found bike paths in LA, which is unheard of. But I was afraid to do it. So then it's the thing, and same thing with like moving. I was afraid to move because I was comfortable. And for me, comfortable is also a very dangerous place to be because I get very mischievous. And if I had not followed the fear, I would have probably still been in Chicago and my life would have been different. But because I followed the fear, it was the best thing for me at that point in my life. But I was very afraid to do it. But once we did it, once you put one foot in front of the other and it starts happening, you'll be amazed at what good things can come of that.
Yeah, you seem to be very yes ending person.
I mean, what good things, everything good comes from saying yes, right? Everything good that happens in your life comes from saying yes. And if you're in a relationship and you don't say yes enough, you're not going to be in that relationship for long. If you're in a job situation and you don't say yes enough, you're not going to have that job for much longer. So it's easier for me to look at that and go, oh, what is yes and? I'm going to listen and add, listen and build, listen and confirm. And having that has served me well. In the times I've gone away from it, I've seen a direct result personally in my own personal life. So it's like, okay, well, I have a choice. I can continue to do this and see the benefits, or I can beat my head against a wall until I understand and come back to it.
Um, did you do ever like solo show or something? Because you're teaching the solo workshop and solo exercises, but did you do a solo, I don't know, scene or show?
No, I mean I did stand up once. I love improvising because I love the energy of someone else. and there's a safety in it for me. I personally am not. I might one day. I'm just not. It doesn't excite me right now to do it. It's not that I'm scared to do it. I can get up there. I mean, the Ask Me Anything sections, that's kind of a solo show where it's just me. So I'm not like, it's not that I'm afraid to do a solo show. It's just something that doesn't appeal to me right now to do. I just don't. I don't find joy in it, and there's other things I'd rather do than do that.
Hmm. So uh, let's go to the end slowly because we really talk long, which is anyway exciting, and I could talk to you another probably 2 hours.
I like how you said go to the end slowly, so we'll
Slowly, because there
slowly
is
go there.
one more question, or maybe two,
Ooh.
but one is short and will be very end. But um, how is it? Because you do also like business stuff and teaching in business and applied improv. What do
Yeah.
you like about it? What's different with these people who never did improv and you teach them?
Well, I mean the one big difference is you're tying in exercises and like philosophies, and you're tying that into a business message. So it's like it might be something like we are having a problem communicating, or we need more empathy, or active listening. And so for when I'm facilitating, a lot of times I'll use like improv exercises,
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes games, but most of the time it's these exercises. And then you go, okay, that was fun. Sometimes it's silly for sure, and you laugh and we have fun, but really now let's take a moment to look at like what's the meaning behind this, like why did we do that, and what can you take out of it to apply moving forward to your everyday.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first did corporate improv stuff, it would be like you'd walk into a business and you'd go, yes, and you zip, zap, zop, yes, and your way to success. Thanks a lot. And then it was like, okay. And it was so well received at first because yes, and was not a philosophy people had necessarily heard of. So a lot of people were like, "Oh, okay, I get it." So it was kind of like teaching in a improv theater, but it was now in a corporate setting. But then it advanced to be like, "What does this have to do with what I do?" And you go, "Okay, let's break down some of these exercises. And what are we talking about?" Well, in this exercise, this represents communication. And sometimes we tie it into improv. Like Monica, you and I are in a scene. I have to wait till you're fully done speaking before I can give an informed response. So then we talk about, are you waiting to talk, or are you listening so you can respond? And so you take kind of those ideas, and then you make the bridge to what they do. And it's like, now when could this come in useful for you in your situation? When was there a time where you could use this skill? And then you kind of lead a facilitated discussion on that. I really like it because I think in that arena, being in the business world, I think improv tools will could help immensely of what's happening. Even in a sense of just like, before I shoot your idea down and say no, let me think first, how could it work? And let me put my ego aside and say, how could this work? And in this team, let me put my ego aside and focus on other people. And, others focused is a big part of what we do in improv. And so a lot of these kind of terminologies we use, like, be in the moment. In the corporate world, it might be, be present, be here now, which is the same thing, right? Or yes, and might be or make each other look good might be, let's have everyone bring their whole self to work, and let's make sure we include your whole self as part of this team. And empathy is a huge thing right now in corporate world, and have an agile mindset. So being able to pivot in the moment, which is the same thing we do in improv. So I'm a really I love the acceptance it's having now in that world, in that business world. And so I'm doing trainings online through Zoom. I do it for companies and sit there. And the only difference is we use a lot of now PowerPoint decks which I think are great. I don't use them in class, but I think it's wonderful here. And you have these breakout sessions, so you can actually do similar things to what we're doing live in the room. But instead, now you go, I'll explain the exercise, then we're going to put you into these breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and we'll have a discussion. And then you just lead a discussion from these folks of like, okay, what and what, how is that applied to what you're doing? And then we have these really rich and robust conversations where somebody says, oh, I was in a situation earlier where this could have been helpful. And then somebody else goes, oh yeah, I was in that situation too. Or somebody says, oh, I actually used that without thinking about it. I did use this yes and phrasing, and I used that mindset to deal with this situation. So a lot of the things in improv are now bleeding over into that business world because of the skills as improvisers. Those skills are needed now more than ever. And you hear from all teachers, what's the number one skill in improv? It's listening. Like, listening is the biggest skill, and you can never get enough practice being a better listener.
Yeah. So what's the best or most rewarding or rewarding? How you
Yeah.
say?
Yeah. Or awarding, either one.
Or both. So from teaching non-improvisers.
Well, I've had experience teaching non-improvisers who come to class, like when I would teach, let's say, like for Second City or IO or any theater. A lot of times, businesses would sometimes pay for them to take classes to improve their public speaking. So I did have experience teaching a lot of people who weren't there to be a performer, who were just there to. Most of the people early on were just there to improve their lives. They weren't there to be a performer. So now the most rewarding or awarding thing I get is when people leave, you see it in their face. They're like, oh, this tool can help me today moving forward. And you really see them latch onto it, and you see it in their eyes, and you're like, oh, this person's going to continue with this philosophy. This has been a tool that they're going to use starting today. And that's the most like rewarding part to me, is when you see it go in somebody's eyes, or they share with you at the end of the class. They walk up and they say, I'll tell you what, I was not looking forward to this, but it was awesome. Like, I love those people where they're like, oh my God, I thought improv, I was so nervous. And then it's like, no, it's just, we're having conversations here. And so when I hear them say that, it makes me feel really good.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's nice answer.
Yeah, it's so great where people go, I thought it was going to suck, man.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey,
Like,
thanks for giving it a shot. Yeah.
hands in the pockets, like, I don't want
Yeah.
to say anything, leave me alone.
Yeah, and I get it. Like, people don't want to be the center of attention. People don't want to. Public speaking is, it's the old Jerry Seinfeld bit, which is the number one fear of humans is public speaking. Number two is death. So they would rather be in the casket than give the eulogy. And I always mention that. It's so funny. But if you can help people, because what it's doing is it's helping them, it's giving them a little bit of confidence too. It's giving them confidence in themselves. And that is the goal for me, is for everyone to gain a little more confidence in themselves, to be better versions and trust themselves. Yes and themselves before yes anding anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that was great. Okay, so this is the very last question. Is this painting painted by you?
That one?
Yes.
That's your last question?
My
Really?
my last question is, would you like to play a scene with me?
Oh, that was painted by me. It was a gift, and yes, I would love to play a scene with you.
The 10 minutes with Monica.
Yeah, we had a blast before.
Okay, so let's do that.
Yes. The most important part of performing. feel so old.
I am old.
Yeah.
I watch you all live. I think it's enough of being your reflection.
You want to switch places?
Okay. I want to be a real person, not only reflection in the mirror.
Well, close your eyes
Okay,
and wish real hard.
I do.
And when you're ready, open your eyes.
I can decide that I move first. I'm real. Oh my God. Hey, wait. I can start live here? I can start live here. I'm real. You are just my reflection. You can't move from there. You will stay there, and I'm free. I'm free. I can move from this bathroom and go outside to the fresh air, see the grass, experience everything. I can't believe that. I'm going to check the door. I'm going to check the door. Hello. I'm alive. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. That's awesome. I'm free. I can leave house. I can leave this room. Oh my God. But how about you? You my reflection now. If I leave, you stay here. And I will take away from you your freedom. How do you feel about that?
Go.
What?
Don't worry about me. If you want to go, go.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I feel bad that if I leave you, you will be here alone. You lived your life. You have your children. You have family. You have parents to take care of, and I can't take it away from you.
I don't think you're taking it away from me. I think you're grabbing it.
Like you mean I have a family now?
Yeah. They're yours.
Oh my God. how about this? I will report to you every day what happened to your family. How are they? And I will promise you, if you want to switch back again, then I promise I will be here and I switch back with you.
Okay. I got to be honest. I'm kind of enjoying being the reflection.
Okay. Then I'm going to have a nice day, and before going to sleep, I will come brush my teeth and I will tell you what we did today. I will tell you everything what I did today with your family. With my family. Okay. Bye. See you. I'll be back in the evening. Bye. See.
Oh my God, that was fun.
Yes, it was fun. So organic, right?
Oh, it was perfect. You don't have, it's so like playing with you, it's like I never feel like anybody's leading. We're just following what's happening. It was great.
Oh, that was so fun.